This video is a work in progress showing a design for the modular boards that TerranScapes produces for a customer who wanted tall, unkept grassy meadow as one of the board options. Now the initial request was for grass that would be chest high for a Warhammer standard model. Now this is a War Machine model to show for a slight variation, but chest high for this person comes up quite high and is kind of difficult to model on a game board that still allows models to be placed either on the foliage or and to use traditional railroad modeling materials to represent tall grass. When you start leaving railroad model materials such as woodland scenics grass, which is some of the tallest grasses here, and was also the grass that I used for the wheat board. There's also a wheat field board video that you could review. The problem then becomes that you start getting into plastics like aquarium grasses and things like that, which to me really start to detract from the realistic look of the board. So I wanted to try a couple new materials and also to get some feedback on its current design. One of the new materials that I thought would be appropriate for this board is these small tufts here. Now this is going to be difficult to see in YouTube, but you can always look at these products online elsewhere. This is called Silflor. It's produced by Woodland Scenics, and it's a small tuft of grass that comes on a sticky backing, and you peel it off, and then with a dab of glue you can add it wherever you like. It was developed for railroad modeling and represents very tall grass for HO scale. Of course, HO scale is much smaller than 28 millimeter, so I wanted to blend some Silflor with some of the Woodland Scenics taller grasses to get a bit of a taller look. Let's see if I can capture height. A little difficult to focus with this camera. So I wanted to blend these grasses together to get a taller effect. Then I had suggested to the customer perhaps developing bases that could have taller grass on them. The models could be placed within to represent, well, not that tall, of course, to represent the taller, unkept prairie grasses. But once I started placing the Silflor and the Woodland Scenics products, and I started dressing up the board with the unkept look, I thought that that might not be a good way to go, primarily because the bases are going to be overlaying tufts of grass that are already on the board, and that seems to defeat the purpose of placing these at all. And this makes it for a bit easier in terms of playability and really improves the realism without having bases placed on top. Then my next questions became, well, how do these grasses play with other models than individuals? Obviously, individual models can be placed anywhere around the tufts of grasses, and so these boards work great for skirmish games such as Warhammer 40K or Lord of the Rings or War Machine, but do they work well with larger models or heavier bases? So the first thing I wanted to check was how does it operate with, say, a large, heavy pewter model. Now this is a War Hydra from the Dark Elf Army. This is the older edition that has just been supplanted by the new Dark Elf release, and on a custom base I made. And this is a solid pewter model and is quite heavy, and so I decided to just start plopping it on top of some of the grasses to see how it affected them. And actually I was pleasantly surprised that when you remove the model and just give it a slight brush, the grasses pretty much return to their shape. So durability wise, the grasses work fairly well. And then my other question was placing regiments of models on them. And so this is a group of 10 Night Goblins from the Battle of Skull Pass set, and you can see, of course, that the tufts really, kick up a corner or two of a large base, which would have been the problem with placing the stands of taller foliage on the board. But really still works okay for regiments in the same way that it doesn't really damage the grass, and you can still move them around quite easily. And so it seems like a good compromise. One thing, though, that would be important, I think, for play, especially if you're using plastic models. Now, so these are plastic, they're quite light, and what I've done is I've mounted all of them on a magnetic base, and then I've made a custom movement tray that I lined with a ferrous lining so that the magnets will stick to it, and then all of my models will stay on my tray and they don't fall off. This makes it a nice option for a board like this because sometimes on a really awkward placement, say right here, I don't know if we can capture that, you can see these models are tipping forward at about 25 degrees. Now if you have metal models or really unusually distorted center of gravity, say for like the standard bearer who might have a large banner that's leaning forward or something like that, that model might fall off the tray. And that's always annoying to me as it kind of breaks the illusion of the game and takes you away from the fun while you're trying to reset your models. So not all of these tufts are that tall, and of course there's only a few placements that are going to produce these kinds of angles, but it is something to consider if you have really unstable models and you're not using magnetic movement trays. Metal models, though, say representing this, they're going to sit relatively flat just because of the size of the base and the weight, and so they're going to press all the grasses down, and then when you remove the models, the grasses kind of stand back up. You can fluff them back up with your finger if they look a little distorted. Another consideration with this example here is that this is only 2 ranks deep, and traditionally, say for night goblins, of course, we're going to have 4 ranks. Now I model mine on a 2-rank deep base so that when a couple ranks are removed, I can pull that base off and still have my models looking nice and clean without having a big movement tray behind them. But if you have a 4-wide movement tray, then obviously it's going to sit a lot more level as well, just because of the length and the geometries involved. So I guess the primary questions that I have are, one, is the density of the foliage on the board sufficient? This is a labor-intensive placement. Every piece is placed by hand and hot glued into place, and so it takes a little while to place all these small, I try to decorate it, of course, with smaller clumps of foliage to really tie it together onto the board and with the other boards that are available. So 1, is the density sufficient? 2, are the grasses tall enough? Let's see if I can tip this board here so we can get a better look at it from a more model eye view. And the shadows actually kind of help, I think, project some of that height. Is the height sufficient to represent an unkept field with a deep grass look? Of course, in modeling wargaming, we're always looking for a compromise between playability and realism. And so definitely a consideration with this style of board. And 3, if this is intended to be used for regimental games such as Warhammer, is that going to be a deterrent to potential use, such as having large movement trays placed on them? I cannot speak to the long-term durability of these grasses in terms of that use, but I will say that if nothing is placed on them permanently, say for a display, they should hold up quite well. The Silfor product in particular is very, very resilient fiber, some kind of acrylic fiber, and it seems quite durable. So overall look, depth of the grass, and general playability. And any feedback that's provided is always welcome. And of course, if you want to see the other modular boards that this would mate to, you can always visit TerranScapes.com, and you can go to the Playing Surfaces page, and you can see the other modular boards that are available that this would accompany.